All right, welcome back. Here we go. We're gonna go. I'm gonna be working on the background a little bit. I want to give you some idea of how my setup is. I'm gonna kind of zoom in a little bit and show you. There's a picture. I've got my computer down here, and then there's the painting of Ava, and then obviously the palette. Now, if you notice, I haven't really worked on anything else on the hands or on the background, so I'm going to be working on that and then glazing a little bit more on Ava's face and giving you a little bit more detail in terms of how it looks. You can see that there's some fuzzy areas in there. You just want to make sure that you clean that off with a t-shirt before you get started. All right, so I'm going to be working up on top first to build up the background, a little bit more Alizarin Crimson to really push that kind of purpley dark area. Go ahead and start adding these bits a little bit more. And that looks pretty dark, so what I'm gonna probably do is wipe it and move it around a little bit more to all these other areas to just kind of move it around. And if I don't want to wipe everything off, what I'm gonna do is put some on here. And I can always use my fingers to lightly move things around. And it seems as though the fingers work really well. Now I know it looks purple, and that's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go on this side as well, and really, it's okay to invade the areas where the hair is at, because those areas are gonna get dark as well. Just gonna quickly put this on, and notice I'm using a bigger brush. All right, this is like a number 6. I'm gonna put it all the way around this way as well to just really push my dark. I'm probably gonna get rid of a lot of this other stuff. I think I'm just gonna focus on Ava's face a little bit more and the highlights around the hand and this other area. So I'm gonna just keep applying here. And you notice I'm not gonna keep these brush strokes. I'm gonna go in and really smooth everything out. But I'm still able to see the colors that are underneath, that red, yellow, blue, even some of the green still underneath that. And I'm just gonna give it kind of like a purple glaze in the background. The next time after it dries, what I'm gonna do then is add a darker kind of blue to that. So I'm just gonna go into these areas by her hair, because usually what happens is those areas are a little too abrupt and then it looks like a wig, or it looks like the background doesn't mesh in with the foreground. And so what I'm doing basically now is just going in with this purple and building up my darks. Okay, now I'm going to be working on the bottom half of the painting and start really adding a lot of the darks and things like that over here. So what I'm doing is I'm really just building up my darks right here, and then I'm gonna go in and add some harder edges so I don't lose all of that. But whatever I'm doing, I'm gonna make sure that I'm keeping everything really smooth. Because this area is so dark, I just want to build up these areas and not give it a lot of detail, because I want the audience to be looking at the face and not so much just some Ava's ginormous hands, because it's foreshortened. I will keep building this up, squinting, looking, watching for the edges. I'm gonna add a little bit more of the red right into that with a little bit of my liquid. I'm gonna start adding these areas here and softening them up. Again, keeping in mind that this area is gonna basically get really dark And because I am the artist, I can decide how dark, how light, and how rich an area and my focal point is. I'm not relegating to just using the photograph as a reference and not so much about just using it for verbatim exactly the way it looks, because I'm not as concerned about that. I'm gonna go in and make sure I keep these areas just dark. And again, up and down, left and right, smooth everything out, allowing again my values, my monochrome that was underneath to guide me and not lose my drawing. If I lose my drawing, I can go back on the edges and define them again. Okay, I'm gonna continue working on the background still. I'm gonna take a smaller brush and kind of make sure that I go into detail on the right side here as well. I keep brushing through here, going up and down, left and right. What I do is add a little bit more richness in her hand, because that area actually is very red. I'm going to make sure that this area gets pretty intense. And pretty dark. What I want to do though is to make sure that I smooth all that out, because there's a lot of texture in that, and I don't want the texture there, because what's going to happen basically is that when it dries, it's going to have that texture, and I don't want that, because again, I want everything smooth. So I can take my brush again and go over these areas to really smooth these parts. Again, no brush strokes. Watch to make sure that the brush hairs are gone, and remember that you're going to keep glazing on top of this, so you can't get all your colors intense and as bright and saturated the first time around. You really have to let things dry and then go back on top. I'm also going to keep working on these other kind of flesh area over here that is fairly light. I'm going into her hands in these spots, and just really pushed, just paying attention to the colors, making sure that I'm not going to make them too light and too dark and things like that. I could always get lighter again later on, so there's no need to be afraid if these areas are correct in detail, because they can always be pushed a little bit more. I can always add a little bit more white if I need to, and really push these areas as individual little fragments, and that will help bring together the whole puzzle. So you're really painting little shapes that then create a larger picture, like the Gestalt theory. Go in and really just kind of detail these areas out, and I know this area gets a little richer and darker and redder, and because it's such a tiny spot, what I can do is just make sure that my edges are in there for the finger, and just making sure this area gets a little, it's going to get a lot darker around there, so you're not going to get to see that finger move into that space. Look at it now, you can see how much darker and richer she is. The hand's a little fuzzy here. I'm going to go back and soften that up with a softer brush, but you'll notice how it all looks kind of purple. The next step I will do after it is dry is I will put a darker blue, and that will deepen up the background again. But you can see from the photo how I really want to push the light on her face. I'm going to work on some details on her face, and then tomorrow I'll darken up the background again.